We'll now move on to the next section, which are our poster presentations. So Nicola is a volunteer and community coordinator at St. Joseph's Shankill.
Thanks, Kim. So what I am going to talk to you today about is about the volunteer program here in St. Joseph's. I'm the volunteer and community coordinator. My email is up there, so if anybody would like to get in contact afterwards, please feel free to do so. Couple of things about me. I am a fanatic about volunteering, so I'm big into volunteering as a volunteer myself, but also in making sure that volunteering is a great opportunity for everyone that volunteers with us here in St. Joseph's. I hate getting my picture taken, as you can see there. I look like a deer in the headlights. But anyway, that's enough about me. As you've heard, from some of my colleagues already over the last couple of days. We're Ireland's largest dementia-specific home, where 60 people live in one of our 6 lodges, and we offer residential respite and daycare. And what we're trying to do is make moments matter with the people in our care. And that's what what our volunteer team help us to do so much. We have achieved the Meaningful Care Matters Butterfly Home Outstanding Award earlier this year. Last year, we were awarded the Charity Impact Award. And I suppose most importantly for me, we achieved the Investing in Volunteers Award earlier this year in January. So we're the first and only nursing home in Ireland to have achieved this award. So it's a great commitment on our part to volunteering, and also to recognise the contribution of all of our volunteers as well. So just to give you a little bit of, to talk about our volunteer program, I suppose I started here in my role in 2018, so coming up on to 3 years now. There were volunteers already involved in St. Joseph's, but I guess my task was to progress that a little bit further, and to try and build the volunteer program and the community program as well. And Niamh's going to talk a little bit about one of our community initiatives in a little while. So really, I suppose the first thing to think about is why, to really as an organisation decide, why you want to involve volunteers and what exactly you want to achieve by involving volunteers. And then after that, you're looking at involving the whole team. Like all of our volunteers would say to us, like when they come in here, that they feel part of the family. They feel like it's a really welcoming place to volunteer, and that's down to the staff. And when you're starting a program, a volunteer program, you want to get the staff on board. You want to get their ideas and their thoughts as well. That way they're going to be more open to involving volunteers, and also have great ideas around, how volunteers could get involved within the organization as well. And it really just creates that atmosphere that's so important. Because volunteers don't have to stick around. If they don't like it, they will go. So it's really important to make sure that you have that atmosphere there within the organization, and that everybody's bought into the idea of involving volunteers. So as I said, we achieved the Investing in Volunteers earlier this year. It was about a year and a half in the making, but even before that, I was at a conference similar to this, I suppose, where another organisation were talking about the Investing in Volunteers programme. And they had used the 9 indicators that the Investing in Volunteers Award uses, and they had created a poster in order to reapply for the award, or for the accreditation. So I kind of thought, well, they've used the poster, I might use the poster. It's a good way to advertise what we want to try and do, and to try and show on the left hand side we have the indicators, and on the right hand side we listed off the things that we're trying to do in order to support and build the volunteer program here in St. Joseph's. So just to go through the 9 indicators, I should say there are currently 9, but I think they're going to change it down to 6, so it'll make things maybe a little bit easier. But I'm going to go through the 9 as quickly as I can, just to give you an idea of what's involved. It's really about having a commitment to the involvement of volunteers, and recognition all across the board, from board level all the way down, that it's a two-way process. It's really important for us here in St. Joseph's that volunteers enjoy their experience here, and that they get a lot out of the experience too. And many of the volunteers will say to us, look, I think I get more out of here than I give. But really for us, it's a two-way process. The second thing is committing resources. Money management, staff time and facilities. A volunteer program does not run itself, and investment needs to be put into that, and you do need to have the resources in place. So you can see in the picture there is this a picture of our volunteer hub. So it's our physical space for the volunteers in St. Joseph's. We've got lockers there, we've got a couple of computers, and it's a space where volunteers can feel that that's their space in St. Joseph's as well. The third thing is to embrace diversity. You want to involve volunteers who represent the diversity of the local community, and it's to encourage that as well, and to put in place maybe procedures or policies to try and encourage maybe groups that wouldn't have normally volunteered with your organisation, but you're trying to advertise yourself as a place where people can come to volunteer, that you're open to including everybody that lives in the local community as well. The fourth indicator is volunteer role, and I would say that this is key to a volunteer program, because within the volunteer role you're setting out what's expected from the volunteer, but also equally what the volunteer can expect from the organisation. So that could be in terms of what exactly the role entails, the training, the support, the supervision, and the boundaries that are important, especially for people that are in our care who are vulnerable adults as well. The fifth one is ensuring that volunteers are protected from physical, financial, and emotional harm arising from volunteering. And you might say, well, like, what exactly is that? But breaking it down, it's really about, ensuring that there is proper insurance cover, that volunteers are included underneath that. That when you're creating those volunteer roles or developing the roles, or maybe developing new roles, that you're risk assessing those as well. And that also in terms of volunteers' data, that you're adhering to GDPR data protection guidelines as well, to make sure that everyone is safe within their volunteering. The sixth indicator is that it's a fair and efficient and consistent recruitment procedure for all volunteers. So, for example, you might know Mary for the last 20 years and Mary would like to volunteer, but Mary is going to have to provide the 3 references like everybody else, so that it's a clear and consistent procedure, that it's the same for all. The screening is the same, but again, looking at the roles, whether or not you need to guard a vet, and that would be looking at the legislation on that to decide. Then the seventh is the volunteer induction. So that's really that volunteers are introduced to staff and to other volunteers, that they're provided with information and training about the organisation, and training then in order to be able to carry out their role as well. And that they're clear on the boundaries for their role. And that's really there just to support the volunteers and protect the volunteers, as well as the people in our care. The eighth one is support and supervision for volunteers, because everybody, I guess, has their own needs in terms of support, and it's about knowing the individual person and being there to support them through their volunteer journey. It's also about getting feedback. So I think our volunteers are probably sick of my emails asking for feedback, or surveys as well asking for feedback, but it's the best way to develop and to continue to grow the program, and to make sure that we're listening, and that we're, if there's some really great suggestions have come out of the volunteer team, and we've gone with them, because it develops the program and it makes it a better program for all of the volunteers. And the ninth one is really recognition, and the most obvious way to recognize is and the simplest way is just to say thank you. And staff our staff team here are great about recognizing the contribution and the commitment of our volunteers. We also send out birthday cards. We ask for feedback, and that's another way of recognizing everyone's commitment. And we also have then annual events, whether it's at Christmas or National Volunteering Week, just to recognise their commitment and contribution to us. And then really just there's benefits for the people in our care, for sure. Before COVID, we had so many volunteers coming in just to spend time to make those moments matter with people who are living with dementia, whether it's in our daycare or whether it was in our residential, in our lodges, and you just had so much fun. And it's just that I got great satisfaction from seeing the connections that were made, and also then there's benefits for the staff, and there's the benefits then for the individual volunteers as well, who have tell us many times that they get more out of the experience, they feel, than they would give as well. So I think I'm a little bit over my time, just to say thank you very much, and I hope you found that useful, and I'll pass back to Kim.
You're absolutely fine, Nicola. That was really interesting. So now I would like to ask Catherine Mullen. She's going to be
Catherine
next.
I'm actually subbing in for Catherine. Kim, this is Siobhan
Very
here.
good. Wonderful.
So I'm Siobhan, I'm just subbing in. Catherine was going to do the introduction, but she's a little bit under the weather, but she is going to do most of this presentation, which we've recorded in advance. Nicola has run through all our kind of accolades, our awards, of which we're all very proud, and it shows you the broad spectrum of what you can achieve if you really set your mind to things, and you have the best team around. So this is Catherine. I'm going to introduce her. Catherine's our activities coordinator here. She describes herself as being a mad granny to 3 grandchildren, full of energy always, and she's a jack of all trades. You could see her up a ladder with a drill sometimes, which is much against our risk assessments, but you can also see her with an arm or a shoulder to cry on, because she's the agony aunt here as well, and she probably is the biggest clown. You might not see that in her presentation today, but any other day, God knows what's going to appear when Catherine arrives. She's going to describe a project that we've developed here. Catherine and actually Nicola, who just was speaking, developed this project called Life on Your Lap. It's taking the life stories of people one step further, and they become a communication tool. They're weighted blankets, which obviously gives that calming effect. And it's a communication tool for people to use, whether it be staff, whether it's visitors, whether it's the person themselves, mainly focused on people at the later stage of life when communication is a little bit more difficult. But it's a way of finding things in common without having that conversation. So I'm going to hand you over to Catherine now, who's going to explain. She's going to talk you through 2 people's life on their laps, and we have chatted to their family, and knowing the people involved, they would be very happy to tell their story.
St. Joseph. What we've done is that people come in and we ask them questions, and they usually give us their life story. So what we did is that we would take out what is very important to them, and we'd write it down on a piece of paper, and we'd hang it in a nice frame, and it'd be outside their door, so that when people were going in to see Mary, they'd be able to talk about what was important to her. But then we felt that we needed to do something more. So why not create something on their lap? And that's exactly what we did. We came up with this idea as Life on Your Lap. So when you read Mary's story, it tells you that she loved baking, as you can see. And there is her famous Victoria sponge that she made for her children. There it is. I'm hanging it up for you so you can see. So as I said, there's Liberty Market. There's her bacon. Very proud mother. She loves to touch soft things. That's a little hat that goes onto a doll. Very classy lady. She loves her jewellery. She always likes to look well for her sweetheart, her husband. Very religious lady as well, which we know. We become detectives here in St. Joseph's. So what we do is that we ask the family what was important in their lives. So what was very important in her life, we try and bring it to the blanket. And that's what we do. So when people come to visit Mary and they're not sure what to talk about, because that does happen when people at the later stage with dementia can't communicate verbally, but they can still see you, they can hear you, you might be able to say the words, but all you have to say is, I remember, Mary, the day that we went to Liberty Market and we got a pair of runners for whatever it may be, or I remember sitting in your house and you're after making a lovely Victoria sponge And then, of course, saying about the children, minding the babies, that the children are all well, being the mammy, cleaning up the house, tidying around. Sometimes we'd even give her a little basin with water in it. Mary is able to move her hands, so she would be able to wash up the dishes, and I'd dry, of course, or someone would dry. So this is why this is a communication tool as well. For people that comes in to see her, they can talk about what's on her lap. And remember, they will reminisce. If they're her friend, they will know exactly what everything means. So that's a good tool for all of them. Myself and Nicola, who works here as well, we were very, very lucky that Nicola looks after all the volunteers. So myself and Nicola, what we did is that we set out the blanket, we put everything in its place, took a photograph and then sent it to our volunteers. And our volunteers then copied what we put in place, and then they weighted the blanket, because sometimes you feel, as you can see, I'm holding on to the baby. It's just normal, it's like a comfort thing. So a weight is like there's something there. So they feel comfort, like as a child would have a security blanket. That's exactly what this is. It just feels like it's something comfort. So we're bringing comfort to them. Hi, this is Owen. And I'm very lucky that I met Owen before he went to the later stage of dementia. And so I knew a little bit about him, what he really liked, and his first love is nature. When he came into us in St. Joseph's, we used to walk over to Shankill Park and we'd take off his shoes and socks so he could feel the grass underneath his feet. And that centred him. He felt like he was part of being outside and part of nature. And as you can see, his blanket is full of nature because that's who he is. And he has a big love of owls. The barn owl is his favourite. And in his room, we even have owls in his room, around his room. And this gives him comfort, and you can see him. He doesn't communicate, but he will with his eyes and his hands. So the touch and seeing and hearing is his main senses. And he always wore a little woolly hat, keep his head warm. As you can see, we have little birds and noise. He likes the noise. Can you see everything there? The bee, the horse, it's just the crackling, the noise of the leaves. You can see the leaves. And the big thing is that he's a rebel. He is an absolute rebel. His songs are Christy Moore. He loves Christy Moore, and he loves James Connolly. That's his song. So I'd always say to him, "Come on up, the rebels!" And you'd see his eyes light up and a big smile, and this who Owen is. So this is what we're doing again, bringing his life story to his lap. As you can see, it's weighted, so it feels nice and comfortable on his legs. And when people come in to visit him, they can talk about all the things that he likes. And don't forget that he's the biggest rebel in St. Joseph's.
So hopefully that gives you an idea of how Life in Your Lap works. It's a simple concept, but it really works. And so many families especially have said how great it is. So thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about that.
That's lovely. And I can see Niamh is there waiting already. So Niamh Moore is the volunteer school ambassador for St. Joseph's Shankill.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Siobhan is going to be to do the slides for me today. Great. Thank you very much, and hello to everybody today. My name is Niamh Moore. I'm a mum of a couple of teenagers, and for the last 4 years I have been a volunteer in St. Joseph's. And one of the programs that I've been involved in, which I've really enjoyed since probably before Christmas last year, it was the School Ambassador program. So I'm going to talk to you about that. One of the things that Nicola had already mentioned before was the Investing in Volunteers program, and she certainly brought a different scope to some of the programs. And one of the things we talked about last year was, as part of the community outreach, is to start reaching out to the schools. And The reason why we decided to do that is to raise awareness about dementia for our school children. We did do an art competition a couple of years ago for a couple of our local national schools, and we got 500 children involved, which was fantastic. And so the next group that we wanted to bring that awareness to was the TY programme. And one of the other aspects was we wanted to break down that stigma of people who are living in a nursing home, and also to give probably a clearer explanation about people living with dementia and how that they can continue to live well and to be an integral part of our community and contribute to our society. So how did we do that? Well, because everything was online, it gave us an opportunity to reach out to an awful lot more than just the local schools. So from January to May, we gave 28 presentations to TY schools through 9 counties, and we estimated overall that we probably presented to just under 1,000 students, which is brilliant for our first time. We hope to double that number of presentations now this year, and we've already started just in the last couple of weeks, so we've already presented to 4 classes already, so which has been great. And as part of this particular programme, what we did was we sent out some information just about St. Joseph's, about dementia, and we sent out a worksheet in advance to all of the TY coordinators so that they could have the opportunity to talk about dementia and discuss the topic with all of their students in advance. One of the things we also did on the St. Joseph's website is we have a section just for the secondary schools. So we uploaded an awful lot of information just around worksheets and some videos and some booklets. So we were able to do that and then in advance. And then as part of the workshop, we invited, so as part of the presentation, we invited the students then at the very beginning to tell us what dementia means to them. And we found that quite a lot of the students were very engaged, and a lot of them would have some understanding of what it was. So we used a series of examples, and we discussed each of the different symptoms and gave very, very day-to-day examples. So it made it a little bit easier to understand for any students that may never have experienced any of their loved ones or a family member with dementia. And I think crucial to this workshop was the traffic lights approach. So we use this method in St. Joseph's to as part of our own training in our volunteer programme. And we use this to describe the process of how somebody who's living with dementia and how it works. So we use the red as the red light is our feelings. The yellow and the amber represents our thinking process, and then the green represents the actions. So, for example, we use the idea that on a windy day, we're sitting down and we've the windows open upstairs, and the window then slams. We will get a fright. So that's our reaction. We feel that we get a fright, which is our feelings, which is the red. And we think of what's happening, so we're processing that, which is the yellow, and then we react, which is the green, and the action. So for the students, what we would explain to them then is that that thinking process is probably a little bit faulty, or it probably doesn't work anymore. And that just simplifies, particularly for the age profile of the students, exactly what might be happening for somebody who's living with dementia. As we continue then through the presentation, we talk about the journey of somebody living with dementia, and in St. Joseph's we use there's the 4 different stages across the bridge, and they're based on Naomi Field's definition, and I believe she's going to be talking a little bit later on. We talk about then the life story and Catherine talked about talking with the families and getting a really good sense of what the person was, their likes and their interests and their hobbies, and then we put them into the memory boxes. So the memory boxes then are those physical representations of that particular person and what they were personal to that particular person. And we use the example of this particular gentleman who's Pat. Pat is with us in St. Joseph's, and Pat used to be a sailor and was up until very recently out on his boat, out in the sea. And we discussed then with the students, so Pat's memory box would, or it contains his hat. So his sailor's hat, he's got the rope with the knot, you can see. He also has a couple of jars. One of them has got some sand in it. There's the seaweed and then the shells. So the memory box represents Pat, but it's actually how the feelings are connected to each of those particular objects. And it's really important to get that through to particularly our students, so that when Pat maybe is feeling a little bit upset, we put the hat on him, and it's exactly how he feels, and also then the smells of the seaweed and the sand on his hand, and that will all bring him back and evoke all those memories of where he felt himself and where he felt safe. We continue then on the workshop, and we ask the students to tell us what items then they would put into their memory box. And needless to say, with students, they completely surprise us every time. It's not always about the phones, even though the phones are very personal, have their own music and their own images. Actually, quite a lot of the students don't necessarily bring that up. They talk about maybe a hoodie that gives them that little bit of security, their art, their music, and maybe the GAA jersey or the rugby jersey, how that might smell, how that feels, the sensation of the material, a sliotar. And I think the image here of the sandwich always makes us laugh, because we had one student who wanted to bring his sandwich recipe with him. And we said, well, you know, everybody has their own way of and making their sandwich. Some of us like the mustard, and some of us like mayonnaise, but he actually said he would bring in his sandwich just to make sure that it's done exactly the way it is. So it's about the students kind of grasping the concept of what it was. Certainly the outcomes, we found the students were really engaged and very informed. The presentations increased the awareness of dementia for the students and the work of St. Joseph's in Shankill. And one of the really interesting outcomes of the presentations over the few months is a number of the teachers replied back to us and told us that they weren't necessarily aware of situations for some of the students, and that the family dynamics might have been very different in what some students were experiencing at home. And finally, then just some feedback. We had a couple of the teachers gave them an insight into something that was becoming more common, and they also talked about that the students discussed how they themselves could support somebody in their community with dementia. We had feedback then from one of the students as well, just on the next slide. Just said that at the time, they lacked the knowledge of the topic and what was really going on for somebody who's living with dementia. And they feel that if they knew now what they did, then they would have been able to make them feel better and possibly not do the things that made them feel bad or upset, because at the end of the day, we all want to help them. So we certainly felt that, and the next slide, the teachers have given us some really positive feedback. We sent a survey to all of the teachers, and from that, with some of the recommendations of the students, we've modified some of the slides just to make it a little bit easier, and we've been delighted to be involved in this particular program. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Niamh. That sounds amazing.
Thank
I
you.
really like that. So then I will turn over to Aileen Chui. She's the acting CNM2 at St. Joseph Shankill.
Hi, my name is Aileen, and I am the Infection Prevention and Control Lead Nurse here in St. Joseph's, Shankill. I am originally from the Philippines and had been working as a nurse for 12 years now. Still, my colleagues would say that I look like a teenager. Well, I take that as a compliment. As what my esteemed colleagues have previously mentioned, and you may be sick of hearing it at this stage, St. Joseph's Shankill is the largest dementia-specific care home in Ireland. And as Nicola have mentioned, we have garnered these 3 awards, and we are really honored for these accomplishments. However, this afternoon, I will be talking to you about our local infection prevention and control practices and how the butterfly model of care has been used as a strategy in preventing the risk of COVID-19 infection. At the onset of the pandemic at around March of 2020, we were caught off guard, same as the whole world. We were not prepared adequately. Yet this pandemic had served as a wake-up call that highlighted the importance of IPC, not only in the acute hospital setting, but also in the community, as well as the residential care homes. As an IPC nurse, I tailor our IPC programs and adapted it in our household model of care. Cocooning was no longer an issue because of the setup in our lodges. We can function independently with our own kitchen, dining, and sitting rooms. So we started our focus with the basics of IPC. We got back on reminding staff on the standards of infection prevention and control. Hand hygiene, donning and doffing of PPE, respiratory and cough etiquette, and cleaning and disinfection were the areas that we really stressed. With a household model of care, we prioritized cleaning schedules of frequently touched surfaces, as well as items such as dolls, soft toys, and sensory mats. Unless, of course, if they are visibly soiled, then they have to be cleaned immediately. Cleaning supplies such as surface disinfectants and alcohol-based wet wipes were made available wherever they are needed. Then, a contingency plan was developed to ensure services would continue should, say, a good portion of staff won't be able to come into work, should the main kitchen would be crippled, or perhaps a COVID-19 outbreak will occur. Further, we also had our continuous risk assessments to ascertain there is zero or the least possible risk in every plan of action or activity performed. Trainings were stopped, then gradually resumed depending on these risk assessments. Same goes with visiting for family members and ancillary medical and essential care services. We are also big in emphasizing nutrition and hydration to promote optimal health and well-being. Macro and micronutrients are introduced to residents through their well-balanced and appetizing meals. We even added pureed fruits and mixed seeds to porridge and enhanced appetite through stimulating the senses. In the mornings, we have the aroma of coffee wafting through the air. We grill onions, butter, rashers, and herbs just about at meal times. A wide range of options for drinks alone are available just to encourage the residents to drink more. Vitamin D supplementation was also considered, and when there are no contraindications. And as what my colleagues Sinay and Sarah have tackled in yesterday's discussion, diversional and life story-based activities were increased during the pandemic in the hope of affecting positive behavior that directly enhances resistance and immunity. For example, walks outside the enclosed garden, or rides on the trio bike for a breath of fresh air, or pool table games for mental stimulation. And from these pictures, they don't really seem to have missed out on anything. But all of this would not have been possible if we had not put focus on effective communication. Residents were encouraged by staff and household members to wash their hands in an engaging and gentle manner. Family members are updated constantly on the whereabouts of their relatives for reassurance through phone calls, photos through MMS, and video calls. This in turn resonates positively on the psychological aspects among residents. Teamwork was boosted through appointment of COVID-19 lead representatives coming from different departments who voices issues and concerns from their respective areas. Weekly staff meetings were also carried out to convey important messages regarding the pandemic. Staff were constantly supported in their well-being, staff app developed, and staff are made sure that they understand the impact of IPC practices on those we are caring for. Especially in the early stages of the pandemic, we have done a lot of IPC trainings through HSC Land, HSC and HSPC recommended videos, and even local demonstrations of hand hygiene and donning and doffing of PPE. Our video here of our former Director of Nursing and Butterfly Model Advocate, Norma Sheehan, is also posted in our staff care app discussed by Aileen earlier. She showed a step-by-step approach with easy to understand and clear instructions on hand hygiene and appropriate wearing of PPE. We may have gone a little overboard there, but our aim was really to let staff realize how easy and doable compliance on these areas could be. During the past 18 months, we had increased IPC audits. Hand hygiene audits are done monthly, and IPC standard audits are done quarterly. Results, of course, are duly relayed to staff to remind them to strive forward. Vigilant surveillance is also an ongoing thing. This had been a new normal to us. Staff have their constant temperature checks. We are keen on symptoms and refrain from going to work should a symptom develop. We subject ourselves to nasopharyngeal swabbing and COVID-19 vaccination, and we do vigilant observation of residents should there be changes in their physical conditions or behavior that signals an impending infection, which we urgently address. In any case, we have also been prepared for an outbreak. Areas for isolation were identified, designated equipment allocated, and supplies gathered. In all honesty, we do face some obstacles along the way. Our biggest challenge early on was compliance, but we deal it with through effective communication, top-down or bottom-up, reinforcing education, providing positive feedback, and adopting a culture of good IPC. Without a doubt, these measures may have really been successful as we have no outbreaks of COVID-19 infection insofar, knock on wood and fingers crossed. That's it really. To stop COVID, we indeed have to simply adhere to infection prevention and control. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Aileen. That was really interesting. Made me feel very safe for the people that you look after.
Thanks.
So that ends the poster presentations today. So thanks to everybody who presented. There's a lot of really interesting information.